We're still in our study of the book of Exodus, talking about the story of God's presence. Today, we want to look at Exodus chapter 15, verses 22 through 27. Entitle our lesson, "To Fear Not the Obstacles in Your Path." You probably have realized for several times, I really like the movie, "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" And I have quoted it often during this series, and will probably do so again. In my opinion, it's one of the funniest movies that was ever made. Early in the movie, Everett, Pete, and Delmer chained together wearing striped pajamas. You hitch a ride on a handcar on the railroad. The old blind man who is pumping the handcar, he tells them, well, if you don't mind, let me quote it the best that I can. The blind man said, "You seek a great fortune, and you will find the fortune, but it will not be the fortune that you seek. First, you must travel a long and difficult road, a road that's fraught with peril. You shall see things too wonderful to tell." I cannot tell you how long this road may be, but fear not the obstacles in your path. It never ceases to amaze me that when we look for God, when we seek His face, when we find Him in all sorts of places, in the good times and on the rough roads. When I think of rough roads, I think of a hunting trip that I went on years ago in Missouri, where we traveled a really rough road for hours to get to one of the most beautiful places that I have ever been, only to have to leave a few days later and travel the rough road again. Many people in this world want you to believe that when you become a Christian, that life will be a bed of roses. There's no more problems, no times of despair, no trials, no testing, no temptations, nothing but easy sailing. I need to tell you, if you've been told this, you've been lied to. The Christian life is often hard. It is made up of rough roads with occasional rest. And the roads that we must travel are often filled with obstacles. But so is everyone's road, because, brethren, this world is a rough place. But when we know Jesus, we do not need to fear the obstacles in our path, because we know that we will end up in a place that is beauty, that is one of beauty one day. But for now, we must endure the obstacles, and we have to try to learn from them to continue our spiritual growth. And today we're picking back up in our story of Exodus. Last week, if you remember, God's people, the Israelites, had finally gained their freedom. God had miraculously delivered them from bondage. He had split the sea in a great show of His power, and the people had raised their voices in praise and worship to God. Yahweh, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, the one who had rescued them just as He had promised. And now 2 million free people set off following God as He led them on a road. Not a smooth road, wasn't an easy road, not even a well-traveled road, but a road that was difficult and one that contained many obstacles. Let's read Exodus 15 and verse 22. Then Moses led the people of Israel away from the Red Sea, and they moved out into the desert of Sur. They traveled in this desert for 3 days without finding any water. The Hebrews were headed for the Promised Land. I have no doubt that they thought God would take them straight there, from point A to point B, as we discussed a couple of weeks back, with no detours, no layovers. But now, here they were. They're traveling through the desert, and they were getting thirsty. You know, I can see someone in my mind saying, what if it's all like this? You know, promised land going to be all like this, no water, no grass, no nothing. Guys, the desert does not have much to offer. No water, little shade, just sand and heat, barely enough feed there to feed a little old lizard. Definitely not to be the land flowing with milk and honey that they were expecting. But remember, God always has a plan. And his plan for his people often contains hardships and obstacles. God needed the people to trust in him and him alone. He needed them to stop looking to themselves. He needed them to stop looking back to Egypt. Stop looking to the desert for their needs and just trust in him. Even when trusting him went against common sense. This is what he needs us to do as well. Look to him. Trust him. Unfortunately, they did what? They did just exactly the opposite. They grumbled and complained. Don't we often follow their lead sometimes? Well, let's pick back up in Exodus 15, verse 23. And when they came to the oasis of Marah, the water was too bitter to drink, so they called the place Marah, which means bitter. Just imagine with me, if you would, just traveling for 3 days in the desert with no water. I know there are some of us who can't go from Sebree to Madisonville without a drink in the cup holder. In fact, I'm going to have to take a drink just to get past the thought of how thirsty they must have been. And then imagine coming to a place that has plenty of water and finding out that it's no good to drink. Water everywhere, not a drop to drink, like the poem, the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Water everywhere, but it is bitter. Not poison, but undrinkable all the same. Imagine what you would do. I hate to say it, but if we get real with ourselves and we are truly honest, I think our action would be real similar to the Israelites. I actually think it would be hard not to complain and grumble. Look at verse 24. Then the people complained and turned against Moses. What are we going to drink? They demanded. Focus on that word, complained. They complained against Moses, but they were going the wrong way. He was thirsty too. He had just walked for 3 days without water also. The complaint was against God, not Moses. And I can tell you, I bet old Moses got tired of hearing those crybabies. I can tell you, I bet he often wanted to say, "Suck it up, buttercup. Just shut up and move on." And I can tell you, as tired as Moses got of it, God must have really been sick of it. Think about it. They had seen his power over and over again. They had seen wondrous things that he had delivered them. He had parted the sea, and how quickly they had forgotten. So here they are, wallowing in hopelessness. What are we going to drink? They asked. They couldn't fix the water. Moses himself could not fix the water. This is where trust comes in. And this is where God wanted them. This is why he brought them to Marah, so that they would trust him. Verse 25. Moses cried out to the Lord for help, and the Lord showed him a piece of wood. Moses threw it into the water, and this made the water good to drink. As sick as Moses was of hearing the grumbling, he still cried out to God on behalf of the people. I think this shows us what a good leader he was. And as sick as God must have been of the grumbling, he still turned the bitter water to sweet. This shows us how great our God is. Key on this as we will come back here soon in our application. He turned the bitter sweet in spite of the complaining, in spite of the grumbling, in spite of the lack of trust. He had Moses chunk in a piece of wood, and presto, good water. Not because they deserved it, not because they had been good, not because of anything that they had done, but because he is God of mercy and because he loved them and he loves us. Next, God through Moses gave them the first of many rules. The Bible calls it a decree, a standard to test their faithfulness, a test of their trust. That's the latter part of verses 25 and 26 of chapter 15. It was there at Marah that the Lord said before them the following decree as a standard to test their faithfulness to him. He said, if you will listen carefully to the voice of the Lord your God and do what is right in his sight, obeying his commands and keeping all his decrees, then I will not make you suffer in any of the diseases I sent on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. I got to tell you, I love this part. He says, if you'll listen to God's voice and do what is right in his sight, he will heal. You see, God heals our souls, spiritual healing. He sometimes heals our bodies. And when he does, it is amazing. But it's our souls, brethren, that need healing. We are sinful beings, and we often have trouble trusting. We are kind of like Pharaoh sometimes, often have a problem with listening. And we definitely have a problem doing what's right. And then when life gets bitter, what do? We grumble and complain and blame God for our messes, instead of trusting him and obeying him. But God still provides. Verse 27 tells me that we serve a God of mercy. They had complained and grumbled, and still God sweetened the bitter. And then God delivers them to a beautiful place. Look at verse 27. After leaving Marah, the Israelites traveled on to the oasis of Elim, where they found 12 springs and 70 palm trees. They camped there beside the water. After 3 days in the desert, after finding bitter water, after grumbling and complaining against God, God in his mercy sweetened the water, and then he took them to a better place. A place with an abundance of water, a place with shade, a place of rest. He took them to Elim simply because he loved them. And simply because they trusted him, well, just a little. But a little was enough. Sometimes we just need a little trust to receive God's blessing. A little faith in God's hands can move mountains. The Bible says that faith the size of a mustard seed. Many times in our lives, God takes us tomorrow. And make no mistake, our trip tomorrow often comes after a mountaintop experience. God promises us abundant life. And that means mountaintops and valleys. And for believers, those who have been buried in baptism and raised to walk in the newness of life, the mountains are higher and the valleys deeper. The best water is often found in the valleys. It is in the valley that we learn to trust God, rely on God, and to meet our needs. It is in the hard times that we need God the most. And it's in the hard times that we come to understand that we need him. And how much do we need him? You know, old Slick or the devil is not happy about our decisions to change teams, to become Christians. He wants to ruin your mountaintop experience. He wants to render you ineffective. He wants to steal your joy. And he wants to cause you to doubt. It is easy to give in, to complain, to grumble. Go back to your old life, your old sins, your old habits, your old hang-ups and relationships. But this is where trust comes in. We must trust in Him. Trust Him because He delivered you in spite of yourself. He delivered you and He will provide for you. You see, God sends us into the desert and in places, obstacles in our path. He sends us tomorrow so we will learn to trust in Him completely in Him. God sends us tomorrow to test us and to grow our faith. Spiritual growth, brethren, comes from pruning. Spiritual growth comes from discipline. That is the confessing of our sins and then making changes in how we live our lives. God sends us tomorrow to teach us to trust and obey Him, even in the toughest times, especially in the tough times. He sends us there to teach us that we can't get to Elam on our own, that only He can take us there. I found a song, dangerously enough, on the internet that actually really touches my heart. And I believe it will yours as well if you think about it. The song, I don't know who wrote it, but the song is entitled, Trust in You. Letting go of every single dream, I lay each one down at your feet. Every moment of my wandering never changes what you see. I've tried to win this war, I confess. My hands are weary. I need your rest. Mighty warrior, king of the fight, no matter what I face, you're by my side. When you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answers as I cry out to you, I will trust. I will trust. I will trust in you. Truth is, you know what tomorrow brings. There's not a day ahead you have not seen. So in all things, be my life and breath. I want what you want, Lord, and nothing less. When you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answers when I cry out to you, I will trust, I will trust, I will trust in you. You are my strength and comfort. You are my steady hand. You are my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand. Your ways are always higher. Your plans are always good. There's not a place where I'll go that you've not already stood. When you don't move the mountains, I'm needing you to move. When you don't part the waters, I wish I could walk through. When you don't give the answers as I cry out to you, I will trust. I will trust. I will trust in you. 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 Brethren, this is what tomorrow was all about. This is what the desert is all about. Learning to trust God completely. Learning to trust God when your marriage is falling apart. Learning to trust God when illness and death knock at the door. Learning to trust God when the job ends and there's more month than money. We don't always understand, and we're not supposed to. But we must trust. Trust. If you are a believer, trust that God will provide. Trust that God has a plan. Trust that it's a good plan. Trust that He will make all things beautiful if we let Him. That we will take the messed up things of our life and use them for His glory. If you have not accepted Jesus Christ, been buried in baptism, trust still applies. John 14, verse 1, Jesus says, don't let your hearts be troubled. Trust in God and trust also in me. Proverbs 3, verses 5 and 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not depend on your own understanding. Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 8 and 9. You love him even though you have never seen him. Though you do not see him now, you trust him, and you rejoice with a glorious, inexpressible joy. The reward for trusting him will be the salvation of your souls. Focus on verse 9 with me, if you will, for just a moment, and then we will end. The reward for trusting him will be the salvation of your souls. Brethren, we need to learn to trust, to put our genuine trust in God and realize that he will provide. The only way to do that, though, is to be one of his children, to have named his name and to have confessed his name, to be buried in baptism and raised to walk in the newness of life. But if you're here today and you've not done that, today would be a great day to do that. But if you are here and you've turned back into the world, if your trust wavers, if it's easier to grumble and complain, think about asking him for his forgiveness and turning back to him and following his commandments and striving hard to live a Christian life. Remember this, the reward for trusting him will be the salvation of your souls. If you have need of the gospel invitation, won't you come while together we stand and sing?
Some glad morning, when this life is o'er, I'll fly away to a home